guys in the dark.
I'd like to keep this completely anonymous for the safety reasons due to the fact that this just happened. I'm an 18-year-old female, and I just started college. Due to COVID, the majority of my classes are online, so I haven't been able to meet many people. Because of this, I decided to try out Tinder. I matched with some really cool people, and didn't have bad experiences besides the occasional pervy guy asking to hook up. But that's what most people are on Tinder for, right? I really wasn't looking for anything serious, but more just people to talk to and get to know. I ended up matching with someone who was in his mid-20s. We talked for a little bit, and he seemed pretty cool. We had stuff in common, so I added him on my Snapchat. Within a couple of days, he was constantly messaging me. I didn't think much about it, and thought he was lonely, or just really enjoyed talking to me. So I tried to be nice and answer when I could. My college major is super busy, and time-consuming. I started to get several snaps and texts from him throughout the day, and he would get frustrated when I wouldn't answer right away. I thought that it was weird because I didn't even know him. I told him I was busy with school. He said he understood and asked if I would try to text him some more. He started calling me baby and said he needed me. Then he started making sexual comments. I started to get uncomfortable and told him to stop. He apologized and said that he wouldn't do it again. A few days later, it happened yet again. He also told me he wanted to drive over an hour to come hang out with me. At this point, I was done with his bullshit. Told him off and removed him from my Snapchat. He texted me apologizing, and I just ignored him. About 3 weeks later, he texted me again to apologize, and once again, I ignore it. I haven't heard from him since, but today I was thinking back on it, and decided to look him up on social media. I couldn't find anything. I thought that it was strange that he didn't have any form of social media whatsoever, because most people who don't have social media at least have Facebook, but he wasn't on there either. I was very curious, so I looked up his first and last name on Google, and several articles popped up about him. Earlier this year, he was charged with child porn, and was released on bail. He had nudes on his device of underage girls. I was sick to my stomach. This whole time, I could have found out with a quick Google search what kind of person he really was. But I was too stupid to even think of that. What was even more stupid is that he used his real name on Tinder and on Snapchat. I haven't spoken to him, and I don't plan on it. Thank God I did not meet up with him. If he ever reaches out to me again, or tries to find me, I will contact the authorities and get a restraining order put in place. So creepy dude from Tinder. Let's never meet. In 2015, I, who was 18 at the time, met, let's just call him Ryan, who was 20 at the time, on Tinder. We talked for a month or two, and then went on a few dates, and after about 2 months, we had our first kiss, and became official. He had moved to my state from California, and told me it was because of a bad breakup with his ex of 3 years. I didn't really dig for more information, stupid me, because it seemed to upset him, and I was like, the past is the past. We take things slow because he has a good old-fashioned kind of man, and I loved it. He opened doors for me, which is a really low bar to have, but was the first time anyone had ever done that for me, so I was just smitten. He genuinely cared about my interests and my well-being. He even cooked and would bring me lunches sometimes. Fast forward to January of 2016. My grandmother is in the hospital. He took off of work and stayed by my side the whole time, only leaving to make food runs or runs to my parents' house for things that we needed. Sadly, on the third day, my grandmother passed away. I stayed at his place, and he had to force me to eat because I was just so depressed. I didn't want life to just go on without her. My mother recommended I move in with him so that I could have the best emotional support. Eventually, after lots of care and therapy, I got better, but was still very depressed. Then disaster struck again in March when I got a phone call from my mother, and she asked me to put Ryan on the phone. His face got grimace, and he just said, "Okay, I understand," then handed the phone back to me. My mother then tells me that my grandfather, who had moved in with her after my grandmother's passing, has also passed away. She and my family have come from a baseball game and had found him in the backyard. He couldn't live without my grandmother anymore, I guess. Ryan had gotten really close to my grandfather in the few months between my grandmother's passing, and my grandfather would often call him to spend time together because he wasn't used to being alone. So the death took a toll on him as well. A few months passed, and everything just felt gray. Then May came up. Ryan took me to where he had our first date, and he proposed. I thought that I had won the jackpot, and now, instead of always feeling down, I had something to look forward to. But here's where things got weird. After he put a ring on it, his attitude changed. He started not liking me hanging with my friends without him. He became jealous of my male coworkers, insisting that they liked me, and constantly tried to get me to quit. Just possessive in general. Things only got worse when I had a false positive pregnancy test. We were so excited to be expecting a baby. We had already had names picked out, and decided to put the wedding on hold and put our focus on buying a house for our new growing family. A week or so later, I just felt off. Something told me to take another pregnancy test, which came back negative. I was understandably heartbroken. But when I told Ryan, his reaction was worse. He started crying uncontrollably, but eventually that sadness turned into rage. He started accusing me of losing the baby on purpose because I didn't love him, and then switched gears to "you must be cheating on me," and lost the baby to hide it. Looking back, I don't know why I stayed at the time. I figured it was just him grieving. He continued to accuse me of cheating for months. I took a shower after work. Suspicious. Must be cheating. I smiled at my phone. Must be cheating. He even went through my phone while I was asleep and deleted every guy in my phone besides him, my brother, my dad, and my stepdad. Then started making me send him Snapchats with random objects with timestamps to prove to him I was where I said I was. Eventually, somehow, we got past it and decided to move in with my dad so that we could buy a house faster. I picked up a second job for extra money to purely go towards our home. And Ryan decided that since I had 2 jobs, he would just quit his. With his newfound free time, he started buying cars, fixing them up, and then selling them for more money. He also would use this time to stalk my social media and question any guy who liked my post, and eventually started going through our phone bill to see numbers I was texting. He then found the breaking point. He discovered I sent more texts a month than he did, which to him was evidence that I was cheating because I have no friends. He brought this up to me one night, and I was able to talk him down and explain to him that's about insane, even showing him that I only text him, my mom, my female best friend, and my boss. With, of course, the occasional text to my dad or uncle. We go to bed, and the next morning he goes on about it again, so I say, "I'm not having the same fight twice," and walk out of the room. What did he decide to do? He takes my car keys and steals my car. He starts texting me about how I never loved him, and that I can go ahead and report the car stolen. He doesn't care anymore, and then he might as well drive off a bridge. I finally convinced him to bring it back. I get in the car and go to my mom's. I then break it off with him. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no. He then says he only does the crazy things like that because he has depression, and I ignore him if he doesn't do something crazy. He promises to get help if I help him and give him another chance. My dumb self believed that and agreed, but only if he would go to a psychiatrist. He goes for about 3 months, gets diagnosed with bipolar depression, and is put on a treatment plan. Things start looking better. Then all of a sudden, they start getting bad again. He told me that he had stopped going because they wanted to take away his guns, and he stopped taking his medicine and flushed it down the toilet. I broke it off with him again because he broke his promise, so then he started stalking me. Anytime I added a new male friend on Facebook, he would message them to leave me alone, and that I was a cheating whore. He told me that he hopes the next guy I date beats and rapes me, so I learned to appreciate him. He would show up at my work and hang around my whole shift trying to brag about how insert random Tinder girl of the time. He even figured out where my new apartment was and tried to get my roommates to let him in. He started giving out my contact information to creepy dudes saying that I was easy. I eventually cut all contact after he started dating a 19-year-old girl. He was 22 by then and bragged about it, just using her to pay his bills as he didn't work, and told me he had gotten her pregnant, but would leave her in a heartbeat just for me. After I had cut contact, I did a little research and found the real reason he left California. He stabbed his ex's brother for trying to defend her after she broke up with him. He also had several domestic abuse charges in 3 other states, and had a few warrants for his arrest. I ended up feeling bad and sending the girl the screenshots of the info I had found, as well as the text he sent me about using her. She didn't believe me and said I was just his crazy, jealous ex, and then she blocked me. As far as I know, they now have 2 kids, and she is the only one who works. So yeah, Ryan, I really don't want to ever see you again. I really feel sorry for this new girl of yours. Last month I moved to another country where I didn't know almost anyone. Due to that, I had spent a lot of time alone and started to get bored. Although I didn't, and don't like the concept of Tinder, I decided to create an account just to meet people and spend hours swiping left and swiping right, having brief conversations with my matches, however. Most of them were men that wanted to see me on the same day, which scared me a little bit. Our story begins when I matched with a 30-year-old girl who didn't wait too long to send me a hi, nor ask to send for my phone number. I, who had never used the app before, thought that was normal, and gave my phone number to her without having spoken at all. That was my first mistake. At first, everything seemed pretty normal. The girl, which we will name Diana, sent me voice notes. We talked briefly and in superficial ways about ourselves. She seemed very, very interested in talking to me, since on several occasions she would double text me when I didn't answer quickly. And I'm not going to lie, I found that pretty curious. However, I paid no attention. The second day of talking to her, she asked me to meet her somewhere. And even though our conversations had been very superficial, I said yes, and we set a place and an hour. But hours before our meet, I regretted it, deleted Tinder, and sent her an apology message. That was where things got weird. She texted me that it was fine, but a few minutes later, she sent me several messages and deleted them within a second so that I wouldn't read them. A couple of hours later, she tried to video call me. I didn't answer and told her I was busy. Despite that, she called me again and again. I kept saying that I was busy, but still, she called me twice at 2 a.m. By that time, I was out and drunk, and I blocked her. I felt a little bad about it, but come on, I'm a woman in her early 20s, living in a foreign country. So at the same time, I felt relief that it was over. Except that it wasn't, and I woke up to a hello from an unknown number, which profile pictures in WhatsApp was one of an old man. I asked him who he was, and in less than a minute I received an answer. It said, "Hi, it's Diana. This is my dad's number. Why did you block me? Did I annoy you?" Even despite of how bizarre that was, I tried to empathize with her and answered with the truth. Again, she told me that it was fine, and I blocked her dad's number. In less than 2 hours, I received another message from another unknown number. It said, "Hi, it's Diana. Why do you keep blocking me? I need to talk to you. Please text me." At this point, I no longer find it funny. I tell her that I'm not interested in talking to her, and she literally tells me, "I need to tell you something. There's a girl who is harassing me. She does black magic." I repeat that I'm not interested, and she goes like, "You don't believe me, don't you?" And I blocked her again, for the 3rd time. Anyway, I really don't know if this was some kind of strange joke, but I think I can say that my first experience using Tinder was pretty tragic. I wonder if it's always this way. Though, because I've been thinking about downloading the app again, at least I know that next time I shouldn't share my phone number with anyone I haven't talked to at all. Let's hope for the best. And Diana, you really need to leave me the fuck alone. So about 4 years ago, I was doing a year abroad in Switzerland as part of my degree. Just before leaving, my boyfriend and I ended our relationship, as he was off to America and myself to Switzerland. Anyway, I was quite bummed at first, and then decided it'd be fun to download Tinder. Just piss about and date meaninglessly, as I wasn't going to be there for longer than a year. So I went on quite a few dates. Some were god-awful, some were pretty decent people. I was in Geneva, so there were people from everywhere, basically. A few months in, I matched with a French guy, and we were chatting for a while. My French and his English were more or less the same level, so there were a few mild miscommunications, but nothing big. I was 20 at the time, and had my age preference set to something like 20 to 27. So I've been chatting with this French guy. I'll call him Pierre, for a couple of weeks, and he seems quite cool. He's 27, so a fair bit older, and he's a science secondary school teacher at an all-girls school. Remember this as I make it even weirder. So we went for a drink, and he buys us quite a few rounds, which is great, because it's Switzerland, and I'm a poor student. By the end of the night, I'm pretty drunk, and I remember making out with him, then getting dropped back to my student accommodation by Pierre. He had been drinking soft drinks after the first. Anyway, I see him a couple other times after this, and he's always pushing the alcohol when we're together. One evening, I slept over as it was late for me to get back, and I wake up in the morning, and he's taken off my bra while I was asleep. He was wide awake, rubbing my back, and staring at me. I hadn't slept with him either. It's just been making out so far. Then he told me his mom was coming to visit, and did I want to meet her. I probably only met this guy 3 times. I decided that I was done with this weirdo, so when I left, I was planning on what to say to get rid of him. Anyway, back home later, I got a text that said something in broken English like, "We slept beautifully," and I just left it on read. Later that evening, I got a call from him, but I just let it go to voicemail. When I listened to it, he sounded really upset, and said that he had to confess something to me because he was falling in love with me, and needed to be honest. He revealed that he'd lied about his age. This reminded me of that episode in Friends where Monica accidentally slept with a high school student, thinking he was in his 20s. This guy looked quite young, so I thought he'd lied and was younger than 27. He's actually 35. I know that's not particularly old, but to date a 20-year-old knowing she thinks you're young, I find that kind of weird. I blocked him on Facebook and on my phone. Just sort of got on with the last week of term. He turned up at the reception desk one day, having known where I lived because he dropped me home that one time. The receptionist asked him to leave and informed me as he got quite insistent, so they just warned me. I didn't hear from him again after this, which was good, and I was flying back to the UK in a week for the Christmas holidays. During the holidays, I got a random Facebook friend request from a pretty legitimate-looking profile, so I accepted it just in case I knew them. It was a bad idea. I got a huge essay from Pierre saying I tracked your flight all the way back home to check that you made sure you got home. Okay, pretty creepy. I blocked this other profile and got a message request from another profile about a week later, saying that he had checked flights from Bristol to Geneva online, and decided that I would have chosen the cheaper one closer to term, so he will meet me and we can chat. Now I don't know if he just turned up at the airport every time a flight from Bristol came in. There are about 2 or 3 a day. But yeah, when I land, I didn't think that he would be there, because who would be able to guess the exact flight that I was on? The minute I come through the gates, I can see him holding a sign with my name on and some flowers. Luckily, he was distracted at the time, so I managed to slip by and get on the train into the city. My friend was already back, so I told her to meet me, and then went to the police station because this guy was pretty weird. Didn't have any trouble with him after this, as he probably found someone else to obsess over. But again, he's a teacher. To girls from the ages of 11 to 18, so gross. Anyway, Pierre, I hope you're not hanging around the airport anymore. I was 20 at the time, single and ready to mingle. I was studying at school about 28 minutes away from my house. And of course, I was on Tinder. Now I have dated some older men. I'm attracted to them. So my setting on Tinder for males was between the ages of 25 and 40. I swiped right on a guy who had looked decent enough, and he was 36. We matched, and he began to message me. We go through a day or two of messaging. I explained that I'm really just looking for a fuck buddy, and he had his own apartment, about a 2-minute walk from my school, which was perfect. We added each other on Snapchat, Instagram, and once he takes a look through all my pictures, his way of messaging becomes pretty strange. He starts to message me stuff on Snapchat like, "You're so beautiful. I want to hold you in my arms. You're like an angel." Now, mind you, we have never met. Once he starts messaging me like that, I realize that he's not my type, especially in a friends with benefits situation. I don't need someone like that. I start to leave him on read, and I ignore his messages. The next weekend, I was going to a wedding. I was all dressed up, and of course, I posted a few pictures on my story, which he immediately started commenting on like, "Oh my God, you're so beautiful. I miss your touch. I want to feel you in my arms." I ignore him, have a good time at the wedding, and right before the wedding started, I popped an edible. By the time I got home, it was midnight, and I was very, very high and very sleepy. I had worked earlier that day and hadn't napped in between. I got into bed and started to go through my phone. I live with my family and everyone was asleep. I started getting messages from this guy again, and I'm so high and tired that I start reading them, giving brief responses and saying, "Aw, thanks." Then he messages me saying, "I think I'm going to come to blank tonight." Blank space is the city where I live, 30 minutes away from his apartment. I respond by saying, "LOL, that's weird. Don't do that," obviously thinking that he is joking. Then he says, "I want to breathe the same air as you. I want to feel you. I want to breathe with you." I begin to freak out, and then he starts messaging me, "Be there soon, babe." I'm like super scared at this point, because I live with my family, and I don't want anything weird happening. Then all of a sudden, I remember that my Snap Map location is on. I go into my map, and I see my little bit emoji, in her cute outfit, sitting at my house. I quickly turn myself onto ghost mode. Then I see his little bit emoji, and it's getting closer and closer to my city. I'll convince myself that he's joking. He's probably on his way to another city near mine, but he's getting closer and closer. It's now 1:30 a.m. in the morning. For the first time in years, I begin to pray. 10 minutes later, I check the Snap Map again. Now, even if you are in ghost mode, you can see if you are sharing locations with someone, although the other person can't. When I looked at my map, I was sharing location with him. He was right outside my house. I looked out my window, and there was a car with his lights on. At this point, I'm so freaked out, my heart is inside my throat. My anxiety is going through the roof, and I'm still high. I end up passing out, falling asleep. I wake up in the morning, scared. I check my phone. He had sent a few messages saying, "You have a beautiful street, a beautiful home. Have a good night, baby." I go into my mom's room to ensure that nothing has happened, and she was fine. I later went to work, and after work I went to the police station, spoke to them. They said they couldn't do anything unless he tried to come over again, and that's when I should call the police. I went home, and for a few days I got no messages. Then at 5 a.m. on the following Tuesday, I got a message. "Even though I drove all the way to your house to breathe the same air as you, you still have not messaged me. I'm not as desperate as I seem. If you ever want this D up into the balls, let me know." Since then, I've heard from him once or twice, but I eventually blocked him. I didn't block him from the start because he knew where my house was. I was scared that if he wouldn't get a hold of me, he would just show up. So a creepy asshole who showed up at my house in the middle of the night. You need to just leave me alone. I'm not interested in you anymore. Looking across the table, it was clear that the conversation had steered into uncharted waters. I was in New York, on the run from my life back in Australia, and currently suffering through the worst dinner party conversation mankind had come up with. Holding a firm, juicy chicken breast in my hand wasn't helping the situation, so when my phone lit up with a notification from my trusty wingman Tinder, I jumped at the chance to excuse myself from dinner and organize a date. She was in her early 30s. She wore the fuck out of a leather jacket like it was an Olympic event. And she was covered in tattoos with double sleeves. stretching right down to her inked-up knuckles. In short, she was right up my alley. Even better, geographically, she was right up the street. Picture this face with tattoos from head to toe. We'd matched on Tinder that night, and by some chance, she was downing whiskey in a bar right down the block from the dinner party I was attending with mates in Brooklyn. Fate works in mysterious ways like that. Sometimes the hand of fate, or maybe it's the index finger, swipes two people together. And just like that, I was sitting on a bar stool, awaiting the arrival of the next potential Tinderella. After a few minutes of waiting, long enough to really start to savor that whiskey bar scent of good liquor and bad decisions, a woman finally arrives. She was short, with flaming red hair, looked nothing like the Tinder picture. Walking past me, she did a double take or two. I suppose that makes it a quadruple take? Finally, she approached me gingerly, her eyes wide with caution, apprehension, like I might spoil the ending of her favorite film at any moment, and said quietly, "Are you Alex?" I nodded, and she seemed to relax a little bit. Going on to add, "Oh my God, you're here alone? Tess thought you'd be here with your friends." I paused for a moment, wondering what part of my very recently sent text along the lines of "looking forward to our date. My mates are heading home, but I'm staying out just to see you" might have given her the exact opposite impression. Really? Because I was pretty clear this was a one-on-one date. Thinking she'd just be impressed with how I looked in real life, and done the classic last-minute switcheroo. "I'll bring her over," this mysterious redhead replied before I get another word in, then melting away through the crowd like red cheese in the hot sun. In a matter of moments, she returned with Tess, who I recognized from her profile pictures, and another of their mates, a rather large and jovial chap. Over the next 15 minutes, a few things became abundantly clear to me. Tess had not assumed I would bring mates. This was a lie. Tess had severe social anxiety. Her friends go everywhere with her to make sure she does not curl into a ball and freak out, which apparently happens if she gets overwhelmed. The tattoos, the leather jackets, the Tinder flirting were all covers for a woman who was so terrified of social interaction that she could not even speak to me. She was devastatingly frozen in social situations. I only wish that was hyperbole. She wouldn't make eye contact with me. She would not string together more than just a few words. And when I did try and take the verbal reins and said something simple about how I really liked New York in the short time that I've spent there, she told me, "No, I don't like what you're saying. Don't say that." So there we were. Not quite an odd couple, as there were 4 of us on this Tinder date, sitting in a booth in what had become a rip-roaring conversation. And no, Tess hadn't found her inner voice yet. This woman, who would pass as a drop-dead gorgeous pin-up model any day of the week, was staring into her drink like a psychic staring into tea leaves. Instead, the conversation came from her flame-haired mate, an equal of flaming gay best friend, both of whom were actually great company. I found out that Tessa's mate hadn't spoken to her mom for years, that she went to acting school, and that she wanted to go to South America while her gay best friend worked in IT, and thought Brooklyn wasn't as cool as everyone keeps saying it was. The 3 of us chatted for a little while about life, love, and the universe, and they apologized on Tessa's behavior for the date. It seemed she was truly wanting to come out, had hoped to have a little more control over her anxiety that day, but upon seeing me, it kind of just fell to pieces. To this day, I don't know if it's a compliment or not. After a solid hour of essentially being on a date with 2 strangers, I stood up to leave. There was to be no romance on this night, and I thanked Tess for giving it a shot. Suddenly a spark of life. She grabbed my arm and asked me to stay. What sorcery was this? It felt like the start of a new direction for the night, and I felt a surge of energy and excitement to stay and learn about this silent, beautiful, mysterious woman. We pulled up seats at the bar in an effort to feel more comfortable, and she quietly introduced me to the bartender. A burly man, possibly half bear, though I'm not quite sure if it was half. His bushy beard was both tidy, Brooklyn hipster, and wildly unkempt at the same time. He and Tess had known each other for years, and she seemed slightly more comfortable in his presence. And for a woman with such nerves, that could only be a good thing. But after 30 more minutes of almost dead silence, and me being told my topics of conversation were still wrong, I stood up to go to the bathroom. And when I went to go sit down again, she was kissing the burly, bearded bartender. Once she saw that I had seen her, Tess ran out the front door sobbing. The bartender stormed off, and her mates chased her outside to console her, leaving a crumpled up handful of dollar bills on the bar to pay for my final drink. I got into a waiting taxi, which pulled away past Tess, who was curled into a ball on the street. Having wasted a solid 4 hours of my night, and indeed my life, I'd seen the powerful paralysis of social anxiety firsthand, and I really only had one thought on my mind. That I really hoped Tess's mates worked things out with her mom. Despite the fact this was probably the worst Tinder date that I've ever been on, I did feel sympathy for Tess, as her condition must be tough. I hope one day she finds her inner voice, or at least someone who will sit in comfortable silence with her. But for me, the quest for my Tinderella went on. So I downloaded Tinder when I was 18, and being single in a big city, I ended up going on a lot of fun dates. One guy really caught my attention, because, well, he was really attractive. We chatted a bit, and I felt pretty into him, so I decided that I would go meet for coffee. He was sweet and charming, and we had a great conversation about school, art, and music. We found out that we were both musicians, and the date was going so well that I agreed to walk the few blocks back to his house so that we could play some music for me. I was new to online dating and was still fairly naive, so I followed him into his weird converted garage bedroom and sat down on the couch while he pulled out his keyboard. He played for a little while, and I started getting a little antsy. He was super into the music and kind of getting aggressive with the keyboard. He was slamming keys down, making these weird noises, so I shot up out of my seat and told him that I should get going soon. He totally went back to normal. His tone changed, and his posture became less hunchbacked. So when he apologized for getting carried away, I agreed to sit back down on the couch so that we could talk some more. He came and sat down next to me. We went back to our earlier conversation. He seemed back to normal and nice. So when he asked if he could kiss me, I agreed. He leaned in towards me, and I closed my eyes waiting. And I waited, but I didn't feel his lips. So I opened my eyes a peek and saw him just staring at me. I threw my head back surprised, but he had snaked his hand back towards my hair and interwoven his fingers so that I couldn't move. He then inhaled deeply and told me that you smell like you're Jewish. I can tell because you smell like my aunt's house. I was totally freaked out at this point, partially because, yes, I am Jewish, and tried to wiggle away from him frantically, stating that I had to go. He then jumped on top of me, and to my horror, started sobbing, yelling that he's so sorry that he made me feel uncomfortable. His body weight was completely preventing me from moving, so I forced myself to rub his back. I told him that I wasn't uncomfortable at all, and that he was really sweet. He made me promise over and over again that I'd see him again before finally getting up. I moved to the door and tried calmly to tell him that I really needed to go. He was blocking my way, and all I could think of was that I needed him to let me leave. I couldn't fight him off. He told me that I needed to kiss him before I could leave, and I quickly pecked him on the lips. He smiled at me, and I was glad that he didn't expect more. "Call me, please. I think that went well," he told me, as he opened up the garage door, and I scurried out. I called my mom and started crying as soon as I was far enough away. She called me a cab home, and I blocked him from every way that he had contact. I saw him once after that on campus, and that was enough for me. So I hope that we never meet again. Okay, so that I'll add some extra info that I've been asked. We very loosely had mutual friends. He was friends with my old roommate, who I no longer was in contact with for very different reasons. I found out that after he knew her because he sold her drugs, I did in fact contact the police. This did happen when I was 18. I'm now 22. Nothing more came out of this. He did share that he had really bad anxiety. However, I was not aware that he was self-medicating with drugs, which were probably the cause of this incident. Last I heard, he was in another state growing weed, and hasn't tried to contact me in almost 2 years. This all happened when I was 19. I'm not the best looking dude, so I've never had much luck with women, and I ended up on Tinder. I wasn't having much luck there either until the third month of using it, when a blonde woman named Katie messaged me. She was pretty enough that I just dismissed her as a bot. It wasn't until 3 days later that she messaged me again, which was odd because bots almost never do it more than once. I clicked on her chat and replied, then looked at her profile. What I saw was pretty generic, but definitely wasn't a bot's profile. We had been talking for like a month when she proposed the idea that I come see her. I was pretty reluctant as she lived nearly 8 hours from me by car. I had to admit, I really did like her quite a bit, and I had been thinking about asking her if I could come see her for a while. After a bit more badgering from her, I finally said I would take the drive to go see her. At this point, I had no reason to doubt she was who she said she was. She had video chatted every other week, and called most days. I just assumed I got really lucky. Things did get a little weird on the way there, though. She kept messaging me, asking me where I was, and making sure I was still coming. At some points, when I took more than 30 minutes to respond, she sends me a slew of annoyed texts. Admittedly, I had chalked this all up to her being nervous about me coming to see her. I was pretty nervous too, so I couldn't blame her. I had a hard time finding the house at first. The directions she gave me were pretty confusing, and it was back through a series of gravel and dirt roads, and a large thicket of trees. It was still about midday when I came onto the old-looking house. A window on the second floor was boarded up, but it didn't look abandoned, just worse for wear. Katie's red buggy that she liked to talk about was parked in front of the garage. My phone and texted her that I was here. She only sent a smiley face in return. When I got out of the car to go knock on the door, I noticed someone was looking at me from one of the second floor windows. I found it a little creepy, but figured it was just her father or something. She had told me that she comes to stay with her every now and again, so I just ignored it. Knocked on her door. She answered with a smile and even gave me a kiss, which surprised me, and I followed her inside. We sat down on her couch and started talking about our plans when I asked her about her dad. "Tell me that your dad was here," I said. Was that I was going to be surprised or not? Katie looked confused and told me that her dad wasn't here. I still thought she was keeping up the act, and I told her that she didn't have to keep pretending, and that I had seen him looking at me through the upstairs window. Katie went pale and said that she had out of there now. Ran out to our cars, and when I questioned Katie, she informed me that her dad wasn't there, and that she had been home alone until I showed up. I called the police, and while I was on the phone giving the address, Katie gasped and pointed to the window where I had seen the guy last. He was looking at us from out the window again. I got a better look of him, and he seemed much older and frail. It's like he hadn't eaten anything in a while. He left the window after he saw that we saw him. The police took half an hour to show up, and the whole time, Katie was just crying and mumbling about how she was an idiot for not keeping her doors locked. When the police finally did show up, one started asking me and Katie questions, and the other two searched the house. They came back out a little later and told me and Katie that while they did not find anyone, they did find that the back door was hanging open. Whoever it was had run out into the woods, but the cops were sure the house was empty now. After the cops left, Katie asked me to stay the night because she was too scared to be in her house alone. I gladly did, and we slept downstairs on the couch, as Katie's bed was the next room next to the one the man had been in. Katie had also brought out the shotgun that her father had given her, but she never used. I told her it was fine, the man's gone, but she just insisted, saying she'd feel safer if we had it out. I'm glad she did. Later that night, I was still wide awake, watching some TV. Katie had somehow managed to fall asleep. In the kitchen, I heard the sound of a doorknob being turned. At this point, I wasn't even scared. I was just pissed off. I flipped on the light in the kitchen and pointed the gun at the kitchen door, and there he was. The guy that had been in the house before was standing on the other side of the glass door. He looked shocked, and I'm glad we had the door locked. The man unfroze and yet again ran into the woods. I woke up Katie and told her what happened, called the police yet again. When they arrived, they did a sweep of the woods and found no one yet again. They told Katie and me that it'd probably be a good idea to stay somewhere else for the night. Katie and I said our goodbyes. She was going to stay at her friend's house, and I was just going home. I left a little after Katie did. I was on the phone with my brother telling him about what happened. My headlights were on. As I was talking, something caught my eye. That fucking man was standing at the corner of the house, just watching me. I gunned it out of there and didn't even bother calling the police again. But I did text Katie, and she said she was going to call them again. I don't think that Katie ever went back to that house alone. So, some context. I have never really been in a long-term relationship. I've dated a girl for a little bit, but I haven't dated a guy. I'm bi. And I've never slept with either a girl or a guy. Like anyone else my age, 21 and female, might do, I start sweeping on Tinder to try and put myself out there. I like to think that I'm not naive. I'm pretty intuitive. I wasn't perceptive about this guy at all. Jake and I swiped and matched each other 2 days ago. Jake's first message telling me he wanted to meet me and my dog. He thought that we were both cute. Liking his directness, I said that we should meet up. The night, the first red flag waved. When I didn't answer him back immediately, he messaged me, asking if he was detecting negativity, chalking up to nervousness. I apologized, explained why I didn't answer, and all was good. We then planned to meet up last night at a bar. Flag number 2 was waved when I arrived at the bar. It's important to note, in the state that I live in, any place selling liquor can't let in someone under 21. I didn't know this, and had been reassured by Jake that I would get in no problem. Of course, this wasn't true. Luckily, in retrospect, unfortunately, seeing my birthday was in just a week, the bouncer let me in anyways. Within minutes, Jake was at the bar too. Meeting this guy, he seemed pretty normal. Red leather jacket, chucks, typical normal dude. He ordered me a gin and tonic, and one for himself. We settled in to talk. He tells me about his life. He's rich, and his family, and I do the same. We play pool at one point, so I put my drink down. This is when things get a little blurry. I can't remember most of our conversation up until we happened to get back to my place. I remember us leaving, us getting in his car, and us getting back to near my place. You have to understand, I don't drink very much, but one drink does not get me drunk. I don't get hangovers. I barely ever brown out, and I never black out. This is important to notice. Once in my town, we decided to go to a nearby market to pick up food. As we are there, red flag 3 occurs. Seeing someone I thought that I knew, I told Jake that I was going to go say hi. He awkwardly backed away and stood outside at his point, refusing to go meet her. I was wrong, though. I didn't know the girl, and soon rejoined him to walk to my place. As we open the door to my place, my roommate, Maddie, opens the door. We say hi, talk a little bit, and she mentions that she's about to take a shower. Jake at this point creepily makes a "oh" sound. Maddie, who is also tipsy at this point, mentions some guy she wants to have sex with. No biggie, it's the way that she rolls. But after his expression and the realization of how tired I was and how drunk, I say that he should go. He does with no attempt at any physical context. This is where the story should end, but it doesn't. Within minutes, this dude blows up my phone with messages, saying he is more open-minded, like my roommate, calling me boring, implying that I am not attracted to guys, saying that he felt no chemistry, and he hoped that we would have cuddled. Show my roommate, who gasps. She's not getting the full meaning of the open-minded comment. Remember, drunk. I ask why she's so shocked. Finally, I get it. He's implying that he wants to sleep with her. That he's more open to sex than I am. Creepy. Definitely creepy. At this point, I'm freaking out. Slowly, I realize I'm acting and feeling. Putting together how one drink shouldn't make me feel this way. I realize I might have been drugged. Maddie and I go to the local police. We report it. I decide not to get tested. I could explain why. But until you're in my position, possibly drugged at 3 a.m., embarrassed, worried that you're wrong, worried that you might be charged for underage drinking, don't judge me. It's a lot harder than it looks to go through the whole process. Anyway, the story ends like this. He's blocked. I'm terrified because he knows where I live, and with me sleeping off whatever's in my body. Jake from Tinder, you need to stop drugging girls. Also, stop creeping on people's roommates. It's definitely gross. 3 or 4 years ago, I decided to check out Tinder and see what it was all about, thinking, what the hell, and that I had nothing else to lose. I quickly made a profile, and after an hour or so of checking out the app and how to use it, I matched with a guy in my area and we just started talking. We spent most of that afternoon exchanging messages and chatting, asking questions, getting to know one another. By late afternoon, he had given me his cell phone number, and we took the messages away from Tinder and started texting. After a few days, everything was normal, and we were having nice chats daily. Naively, I thought this was pretty cool, to match with someone so nice, and that had similar interests on my first go using Tinder. Boy, was I wrong. On the fourth day of us texting back and forth, his tone shifts, and he starts asking really odd questions, some of them pretty sexual, some of them not. There had been flirting between us, and a few double entendres, nothing like what he started asking. A lot of his questions were really sexually specific. I quickly nipped this in the bud, and told him that I was uncomfortable. He apologized for this, and accepted how I was feeling. We proceed from there. I'll bet a lot more continually on that part. I didn't have a lot of dating experience at the age of 20, and as this was my first time using Tinder and online dating, I thought this was normal behavior. However, I knew not to ignore the odd feeling I had in the pit of my stomach. When he asked if I'd like to meet up for a coffee a couple of days later, I accepted somewhat reluctantly. I knew enough about this sort of stuff to make sure to tell people I was going out, who with, and where we were going in case anything had happened. After we agreed on a local coffee shop, the tone turned again, and he started making all these assumptions, and I had to tell him several times that no, I would not sleep with him right away. The final straw came when he started texting, saying that he would run away together, and that he was going to take me away, and we could elope. Just as I'm formulating a text to send back to him in reply to the "I want to whisk you away" message, my phone pings, and I get a message from him telling me that he has rope and duct tape in the back of his car, ready for us to use. I noped out of there real quickly. I stopped replying to his messages, blocked him, then reported his profile through Tinder. I wasn't sure what else to do about the situation aside from that, but I made sure that anyone I knew who was using Tinder, I told them about this guy, so if he came up, they knew not to match with him. So guy with the rope and duct tape in the back of his car who wants to take a girl away. That was pretty creepy, and I hope you don't try that on another woman. I matched this girl on Tinder. We talked. We seemed to have an online chemistry, and we swapped numbers. Nothing too special so far. But then I get a text at 2 in the morning asking me what I'm doing. So 10 minutes later, I'm driving to see this girl. Nothing too out of the ordinary just yet. But when I get there, she comes down the stairs of her apartment and starts making out with me. Okay, good time so far, but I've got a little bit of a dry mouth and really need some water. Nope, can't go upstairs. Can we go to your car? Cool, we're in the car. Where things are getting hot and heavy. Pants went down, things went places. So far, so good. But then out of the corner of my eye, I start seeing this flashing light. What the fuck is that? Don't worry about it, baby. I'm young, dumb, and full of cum at this point, so I don't worry about it. But a little while later, the car starts to fog up a little too much, and combined with my cotton mouth, my soldier and I need some air. So I open up the car door, and just as we both get out, at roughly 3 in the morning at this point, this damn flashlight comes out of nowhere and centers right on me. She doesn't see this and is trying to pull me away to the back of her apartment complex, and I'm half running, half staggering penguin style behind her with this flashlight walking right for me. I'm literally caught with my pants around my ankles. Fan-fucking-tastic. Even though I'm feeling like a young stud at this point in my hero's journey, I start to go over a few scenarios in my head, and not a single one of them good. Fuck, it's her husband. Damn it, that's why I couldn't go upstairs for water. Shit, fuck! He's walking towards me, so he hasn't shot me yet. So I have that going for me at least, which is pretty nice. But what do I do? I've seen those fight me pranks, so maybe he'll run away if I go after him with my dick hanging out. No, he's got to be so upset that he doesn't even care. Damn it, does he have a weapon? I can't tell at this point. And just when all hope seemed lost, I hear the voice behind me. Still unable to see who it actually is, though. They call out her name and ask her what she's doing. Wait, was that a woman's voice? No, I can't be that lucky. It's a guy's voice, and his voice is cracking from the anger. It's gotta be. Her. Oh, hi, sis. What are you doing up? Oh, thank you, Lord, baby Jesus. It's a woman, and she's like only 5 foot tall, and doesn't have a weapon, and is barely covering herself with her rope. Hey, she's not bad looking either, I guess. So the sister starts verbally abusing the both of us. My good time gal's skirt hides her. Kind of, but my junk is still out of my trunk, and just hanging around. I've still got cotton mouth, and thirsty as all hell. The sister takes a picture of me and my car, and then tells her sister to come back upstairs. My new flashlighty friend leaves, and this girl pulls me to the back of the apartment complex to finish up, and sends me on my way. We proceed to date for a few months for fun until she gets a serious boyfriend, and I never got my friggin' water, and almost ran out of gas on the way back home. Talk about a rough life. Makes me thirsty just thinking about it. While this didn't happen to me, I was present for a good part of the date, and heard about the rest of it pretty much immediately afterwards. My friend, who's an 18-year-old German girl, had matched with a guy on Tinder, and decided to go on a date with him to a club. Of course, since he was bringing a friend, and it wouldn't be safe for a 5-foot-nothing girl to meet 2 blocks in a foreign country while drinking, I had to tag along. This was, of course, quite weird. They were being all flirty, while me and this other guy are just kind of there. I imagine they were expecting her to bring a female friend, which I had told her to, so it was kind of awkward. Anyway, we decided to go to a bar first. It didn't take me long to not like the Tinder guy. Not only did he pay basically no attention to anyone but himself, he also made it quite clear that myself and his friend were just in the way. While he was at the bar, the 3 of us had sat down. Me opposite to his friend, my friend next to me. What would have made sense, and been far more polite, would have been for him to sit next to his friend, leaving us in a regular 4-person formation. No, he sits next to my friend, leaving us in a line of 3. This, of course, was a very tactical way of making sure that he could only talk to the girl, leaving the whole situation very awkward. Anyway, that's not the interesting bit. It was just me giving you an impression of the guy. Shortly after, his friend and I both go to our respective beds, leaving those 2 on their own. This was, of course, their choice, rather than abandonment. So, I just head home, and that's pretty much the last that I hear of that night. The exception being a location pin my friend sent me, just in case I needed to find her body the next day. It turns out that shortly after I left, they decided to go to another bar this guy knew. Except he didn't actually want to go to the bar. He just wanted to talk. So they sat down in a public place and started to chat. Before he eventually got to the point, I want to shag you. Naturally, my friend was less than enthused by the generous offer. So what's a guy to do when the fair maiden rejects his charming advances? Well, he's to whack his willy out, of course. That's right. He stood up, dropped his trousers, and pulled out his pecker. As if that's going to persuade a girl that you actually are worth it. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.